Hello, and welcome to today's lecture on Chapter 11, Communicating in the Workplace and Working in Teams. I'd like to say that life is a team sport. No matter what team you're on a team. We're working in groups every day, whether it's our family group, our friend group, our school group, or our work group, or if we actually play on a baseball or soccer or football team. We are always working in teams. So today we're going to be talking about how vital and how important it is to work well with others. Did you know that employers rank the ability to work in teams only second to outstanding verbal communication skills? So, I find it interesting that you're going to be doing a group project in my class that you can then relate as a possible interview question in a future interview with your potential employer. So let's talk about why good communicators work well in teams. There are a lot of things that being a good communicator can do to help you in your group work. First of all, it's been shown that good communicators do work well with others. They also have the client's or customer's satisfaction in mind. Any of you who work in the customer service field know it's all about them and making them happy, because if they're not happy, they're going to tell everybody they know. Good communicators also build public awareness. You see this all the time when you see brand ambassadors on Instagram or Facebook. Once someone likes your product, they're going to tell all their friends. Good communicators also make good leaders. Let's face it, leaders spend most of their time communicating about problems with their team. If a good leader isn't a good communicator, how are they going to handle that? How are they going to get others to follow them? Good question. And good communicators also inspire others. There was once a story about a boss who offered to resign from his job rather than lay off his employees. And he was able to work together with his employees to make the necessary reductions in the budget so that nobody had to lose their jobs. After that, the boss had tremendous respect from all his employees. So it's important that you work on becoming a better communicator, not only to help your relationships with your friends and family and your loved ones, but with the people that you work with in team or group settings. So let's talk about your job. Let's talk about mistakes that people make at work. And we all have been there. We've all had jobs we've disliked, or maybe we liked our jobs, but we disliked the environment or the people that we work with. There are a lot of bad things that happen on the job. Wouldn't you agree? Some of these things are when other employees make fun of people, either coworkers or even worse, customers. Sometimes people overshare at work. They look at being at work as a social hour, and they're not being paid to talk about their personal life. They're being paid to do their job. So remember that the next time you're at work. And how you would feel if you were the owner of the company. Would you like someone working for you that was sitting around goofing off and talking about personal things, or are you paying them to do a job? Mistakes also people make are overlooking cultural differences. As you know, culture is a very big part of our world, and it's important to be culturally sensitive to everybody. It's also a mistake that a lot of people do is they gossip. They spread rumors. And again, it's not healthy and it's not a good thing to do. Another mistake people make is they do less than their best. Again, you're getting paid to do a job and you're getting paid to do it well. So I wouldn't personally hand in sloppy work if I were you, because again, you never know who's watching you. A lot of times people lose their cool at work, especially when they have a difficult or angry customer that's yelling and screaming at them. I know we've all been there. But again, all that's going to happen is if you lose your cool, you're going to get fired, because the customer is always right. So remember, if you find your emotions getting the best of you, call in your manager so they can help you. After all, that's what they get paid the big bucks for. Also, sometimes people fixate on a mistake. We all make mistakes. We're human. The key is to learn from the mistake and move on from it. So now let's talk about ways that you can communicate in a professional manner online. Now, our world is rapidly evolving and changing, and more we are doing things online. So it's important that we monitor our online presence and that we're careful about how we present ourselves to others, especially when it comes to our job. You want to take part in training if it's possible. A lot of people look at this as a chore or something extra, but remember, the learning never stops. Even when you graduate college and you have your job, there's always another position that you're going to aspire to, and that's going to require training and experience and learning. So soak it all up and do as much training as you can. You want to develop camaraderie with your teammates. Your job is a lot easier to do when there's a good work environment. Wouldn't you agree? You also want to make sure that you use correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation. I've emphasized this multiple times throughout the semester, and it doesn't stop when you leave school. Good spelling, good grammar, proper punctuation, and capitalization is important. You also want to make sure that when you answer an email that you watch your tone. As you know, there's a lot of danger in emails as well as text messages because the tone is missing. And it's hard for the message to be properly translated and understood. And sometimes the receiver might get the wrong impression. Speaking of email, you want to email with caution. You also don't necessarily want to hit reply all if it's a large email that came out. You really want to read and reread your emails because, again, once you hit send, you can't retrieve it back out of the receiver's inbox. You also don't want to convey sensitive information electronically. That's to protect you and the receiver and the content involved. Also, remember, anything that you put in an email represents a paper trail, and it can be traced back to you, so you've got to be extremely careful. You also want to dress for the camera. Remember, Zoom does have an option for camera on or video off, but if you are going to have the video on, you definitely want to be looking your best. And you also want to pay attention because remember, if you are asked a question by your boss and you weren't listening, you may not look very good there. So it's always important to pay attention. So now let's talk about leadership, shall we? Leaders and leadership are two different things. So let me talk about that. A leader is a person and leadership is a behavior. So in your group projects, I asked you to think about and identify who you felt who your group leader was and why, and how he or she got to that position. Sometimes people think that leaders are born and not made. I'm not sure what you think, but we're going to discuss various types of leadership. So one type of leadership strategy is the trait theory, which is that people believe that leaders are born that way. There are some people that believe in the situational leadership theory, which is that a leader's style will change with the circumstances involved. I personally believe that you need to be flexible and adaptable to all situations, and you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach for leadership. Now, the managerial grid is something that I want to discuss. It is in the chapter, and it will make sense when you look at the diagram, but let me break down the different parts of this diagram. So on the bottom left corner, you've got the impoverished manager. And this type of manager has very little interest not only in people and relationships, but the tasks themselves. In fact, I wonder how impoverished managers get to their position, because if they don't care about people and they don't care about getting the job done, I don't think they're going to last in their position very long. Do you? The next type of manager is the opposite of the impoverished manager. It's the country club manager. And as the name implies, this type of manager cares more about people and relationships and little regard to getting the tasks done. So he or she is only interested in building relationships with his or her employees. Now, the authority obedience type of manager cares only about tasks. And you might be familiar with this type of manager. This person only cares about getting the job done and getting it done well, but they don't care at all about their people. And it's really difficult to work for a manager like that. Wouldn't you agree? Now, a middle of the road manager is someone that has moderate interest in the tasks and the relationships. So they're kind of like right in the center of the entire grid is a middle of the road manager. But to be honest, the best type of manager is a team manager. And these people have a high regard for people and relationships amongst their employees, and also a high regard for getting the task done, getting the job done well, and getting it done correctly. So again, think about the managerial grid. Think about the managers you've worked for and where they fall along this grid, and what kind of manager you'd like to be. Now, the transformational theory of leadership is that these type of managers recruit strong team members and support their efforts. It follows the path that the leaders are devoted to fulfilling their employees' full potential. And when you work for a transformational leader, it really is an awesome thing. Now, have any of you worked for a difficult boss? I know I have. It's not easy, is it? Well, here are some tips for working with a difficult boss. Number one, try and put in some extra effort. I know you feel it might be overlooked, but it might not. And again, it couldn't hurt, right? The second thing you could do is make up the difference. If someone is not pulling their slack, make up for it. Take care of it. Get it done. Because if your manager finds out you're the one who did it, that's only going to make you look good. If you're having a difficult experience with a boss, you may want to talk to other people and seek out their advice. Again, be very careful who you talk with and make sure it's someone that you can trust. Also, try and clarify and improve the situation. You may want to talk to your boss directly and ask him or her what is lacking or what is missing and how you can better improve. Again, it'll only make you look better that you're trying to do a better job and improve yourself. You also want to manage your expectations. I mean, it's good to think positive, but you may not have a lot of control over the situation, and you can only control what you can control, and you have to accept that. In which case, you might have to consider moving on. If you've tried everything, if you've done everything possible that you can think of, it may be time for you to leave and find another job. And that's okay. But just remember, don't quit. Always give a 2-week notice and be professional. You always want to keep a professional demeanor. You never want to burn a bridge with anybody. Speaking of which, let me talk about steps to leave a job without burning a bridge. So the first step is to put your resignation in writing. You should always be polite and give a 2-week notice. Sometimes your employer won't let you work out the 2 weeks and they'll let you leave, in which case that's great, especially if you have your other job waiting for you. And by the way, not that you've ever heard this before, but you should never leave a job unless you have another one lined up. I know your job may be miserable. Your boss may be awful. You can't stand another moment there. But I'll tell you what's worse than that is not having a paycheck. Because guess what? The bills are still there. So make sure you put your resignation in writing and give a 2-week notice. Make sure you then deliver this news personally to your manager at an appropriate time in which he or she can speak to you in private. You also, after you speak with your boss, you can then share the information with your coworkers, but make sure you share the news gracefully and graciously. Even though you're happy inside to be getting out of there, you never want to leave on a negative note, and you don't want to criticize or complain. You want to stay positive. If you happen to be training your replacement, stay there. Teach that person everything he or she needs to know to do your job. And as you know, if you've ever trained someone before, it's amazing how much you do, right? Especially when you're trying to teach someone else how to do it as well. But overall, you need to stay positive and know that better things are out there for you. So now we're going to talk about power in the workplace. Power exists everywhere in our world, but it definitely exists in the workplace. So there are different types of power that I'm going to discuss. The first type of power is legitimate power, and that means someone has a formal role or a title. They're a manager, they're an assistant manager, they're a president, they're a VP. Whatever their title is, that gives them the power. The next type of power is expert power, and that basically means that that person has the specialized knowledge or skills that makes them powerful. The third type of power is connection power, and that's with building relationships. And that's why it's so important to build positive and maintain positive relationships with your coworkers, because connective power is very, very strong. There's also reward power, which, as the name implies, if you do X, I will reward you with Y. So if you do this, you will be rewarded. The opposite of this is coercive power, and no one likes this. This is when you're told, if you don't do this, this is going to happen to you. You will be punished if you don't follow through. And the last type of power is referent power, and this means that you're likable. This means that people trust you, they respect you, they like you, and they genuinely want to be around you. And believe it or not, referent power is extremely strong. If you have this, you definitely have some power up your sleeve. Now, the remainder of this lecture is going to be focused on group work and communication within small groups, which we've defined to be 3 or more people working together to achieve common goals. Now, it's important that you know that within a group, there are 2 different types of goals. You're going to have group goals, which everyone agrees on, and then you have individual goals, which are very personal. And sometimes these personal goals are not shared openly with other members of your group. Rules and norms, both official and unspoken, also influence group dynamics. Rules are official guidelines of how people in the group should act and behave, and things that they should do or not do. And norms are conveyed in example and not words. So we're going to talk now about roles within groups. And in roles, they can be in groups, your teammates will have different roles. So these roles may be formal or informal. So if they're formal, they're explicitly assigned. But if they're informal, they'll fall into one of 2 categories, either task roles or maintenance roles. Let me explain what that means. A task is what? It's a job. It's something to do. So task roles focus on getting the job done, and maintenance roles have to do with the socialization and the relationships amongst the teammates. Now, you may think to yourself, you may ask yourself, well, is it more important to get the job done, or is it more important to have good communication and good relationships with my teammates? Well, my answer to that is both. It's equally important. If all you care about is getting the job done and you don't care about people, it's going to be kicking and screaming and fighting all the way to the finish line. But if all you care is about having a good time and having good relationships with your teammates, then the job's not going to get done. So as you can see, it's a delicate balance. Sometimes roles in groups can be dysfunctional. There can be stage hogs. There can be people that are narcissists that use their group team meetings as their personal therapy sessions. These are just a few that I'm naming of dysfunctional roles. But remember, you have limited time together as a group, and everything is temporary. You can get through it with a positive attitude and open communication. So, part of group communication entails problem solving. And groups can be really good problem solvers because 3 heads are better than 1, right? They're more likely to catch errors. And these teammates come with diverse ideas as well as skills and abilities and talents that you don't possess as individuals. So groups have been found to be more productive than the individuals within them working by themselves. Now, I'm going to talk about some different stages in the decision-making process. There is a 4-step process in which groups come together. and makes decisions. So the first is the orientation stage, which is forming. And during this time, there's apprehensiveness and tentativeness amongst the teammates. They're not likely to share their true feelings. Then there's storming or conflict, in which there's arguments about how things should be done. Then there's emergence or norming, as things tend to calm down and people tend to settle into their roles. And then finally, there's the reinforcement stage, also known as performing, in which finally the group begins to function together effectively as a team. And honestly, you should be focused on building cohesiveness in your group. And cohesiveness is defined as the degree in which members feel connected and committed to one another. So in your group meetings, which I hope you're having often, I want you to make the most of them. I want you to encourage equal participation from your teammates and ask their opinions if they're on the shy side. I want you to avoid information overload as well as underload, and not give too much or too little. Sometimes when I read the peer evaluations, I read how people wish that some of their teammates would have contributed more, not only with the amount of work, but just in the amount of conversation on topics. Also, avoid the pressure to conform. This is called groupthink, in which people support an idea without challenging it, and they just go along for the group's sake because they don't want to be a wet towel and drown out someone else's idea, or they just don't care and they go along with it, and it's a really bad idea. And you want to make the most of the diversity and the awesomeness in your group. Remember, everyone has skills and talents that you don't, so utilize it. So there is, in group problem solving, there is something called the reflective thinking method, which was developed by John Dewey. And I want to quickly touch upon this because it's important that you consider this. The first step in the reflective thinking method is to identify the problem. The second step is to then analyze the problem. The third step is to possibly identify the criteria for success. The fourth step is to gather relevant information. The fifth step is to consider forces for and against the issue. Look at it from different angles. The fifth step is to develop creative solutions. The sixth step is to then evaluate these solutions. The seventh step is to make a decision and implement the plan. And the eighth step is to do follow-up. So again, problem solving isn't easy, but 3 heads are better than 1. So with everyone's input, you can get this done. And remember, brainstorming is a very powerful way to develop creative ideas and to problem solve the issues that your team will face. So how do you reach this group decision? There are different things you can do. You can demand that you have consensus, which is not easy because that means you have to have 100% support from everybody in your group. And sometimes you may have a false consensus because someone will go along even though they don't really care or they don't really have the energy to fight against their group. So trying to strive for consensus is difficult. You may let the majority decide, and that's fine. You could have a vote, but then again, someone will win and someone will lose. And if you lose, are you willing to go with what the team decides or the majority decides? Remember, you can't always get your way. You could also rely on experts, call in someone to make the decision for you. That's an expert, although I don't think you're going to be doing this in your group project. You could also let a few members decide, which really isn't fair to have that power put in the hands of just a few folks. So there are different ways that you can problem solve within your groups. The things that you need to remember is to allow everyone an opportunity to express their opinions, to listen respectfully, and to know that when you work together, you can definitely achieve more together than you can alone. Because an acronym for team is together, everybody achieves more. So thanks for listening today, and I hope you found this lecture helpful. I look forward to seeing you at the next lecture.